So nice of you to come on my channel. Um, and do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, thanks for having me, first of all, and congratulations on getting your 500 subscriber mark. That's a nice little milestone to get to. Um, so I'm Joe from the F1 Club. My channel is very similar to yours. It's all just a sort of a F1 topical talk, really, talking through all things Formula One, Formula Two, and Formula Three. If you're into this channel, you'll probably like my channel, and if you're into my channel, you'll probably like this channel. So make sure you're checking out both.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
I
sure.
thought
So
today's
I think
topic
it's quite
we're going
an
to talk
interesting
about
thing because with
the
Renault, they're a
realistic
bit of a difficult
chances,
team to
realistic
call what they're
drivers
going to do.
for
They've got a lot
Renault.
of
So do you want to
options on the table.
kick
There's
today's topic
options that are
off,
very
then, Joe?
unrealistic in my opinion. I don't know how you feel about Sebastian Vettel, but I don't really think that's a realistic option.
Yeah, I mean Sebastian Vettel, I can't really see him coming. I can't really see him being in a Renault. I do sort of like. I do sort of think there's something going on between Total Wolff and Sebastian, because
Yeah.
I don't know whether you've seen it, but I think they've got sort of some kind of negotiation going.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something going on because I mean, when all of this first started happening and Vettel revealed that he was going to be leaving Ferrari, and then Carlos Sainz officially moved over, and then Ricardo obviously moved to McLaren, it left that question of who's going to go to Renault. And in my head, I thought I can't see Vettel moving in that direction. I can't see him wanting to be in a car that's not a championship competing car. The only place I could see him is at Mercedes, but Vettel hasn't said he's going to retire. Toto and Mercedes haven't said that they're not willing to sign him. They've actually said the opposite. So they've said that they would be silly not to pay attention to him, and that they're going to be looking and paying attention to him this year. And then they're going to make. They're basically saying if he performs well this year, they're going to look at offering him a contract. I don't know what you think of that, but that's what I think they're sort of alluding to.
Yeah, and what I can see happening then is a bit of a similar situation. What happened to Ocon? Because don't forget, Ocon is still technically linked with. He is still a Mercedes driver.
Yeah.
I can see Toto or Mercedes parking sort of swapping Bottas and like swapping Bottas and Vettel, so to speak. So
yeah, I mean, the only thing that I think maybe stops Vettel's chances and makes me think, well, could he ever end up in that Renault seat is if Mercedes decide to prioritise George Russell. If they decide to prioritise him, the young talent, and Vettel is desperate for a drive, that's the only way I can see him ending up in that Renault seat. But then again, we know what Sebastian Vettel's like, and I like you said earlier, I just can't see it being an option for him to go to Renault.
Yeah, I mean, it is stranger things have happened.
For sure. Yeah.
But I think, as I said, stranger things have happened. But I think it's very if you put a percentage into it, then I can see him retiring more than I can see him going Renault, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel the same. And that sort of brings me into the Alonso thing as well, because Alonso is already retired, but there was a lot of speculation, and there's been a lot of sort of momentum behind the Alonso rumours that have been coming through. So there was these stories about how Liberty Media were going to foot some of the bill so that Alonso could come back to Renault. But again, I'm not sure whether he's a good option for Renault, because if we think about it logically, Alonso is not a long-term option, is he, for Renault?
no, no. I mean, um, we can just hope and see what's occurring. Like, but I think the Alonso thing that's a no go. I really do think that's a no go because, to be honest with you, by the time he's finished, like by the time he's back in F1, in 2021, he's going to be 40
Yeah,
40 years
his
old.
age, yeah, his age is certainly ticking on. And the other thing I think as well is he's had such a, I'd like to say, interesting career. A lot of the teams he's been at, he's been a bit accused of being a bit toxic, and his winning mentality gets in the way of his relationships a lot. So I do have to ask the question about whether he'd be a good fit for Renault, because at the moment I think they need to sign someone that's going to be committed to Renault. With losing a driver like Daniel Ricciardo, they're going to need to sign somebody that's going to just commit to the Renault name and maybe put all their money behind Ocon.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think it would be the third stage within Fernando's career within Renault, and I think that's not that's that's not good. I think he's had his chance in Formula One, and I
Yeah,
mean, with all respect to Fernando Alonso, I mean, he's not a Michael Schumacher, who actually, I mean, he is a two-time world champion. There's no denying that, but he's not like a seven-time world champion like Michael Schumacher, where that fact alone actually helped out Mercedes, I think.
yeah.
When Michael Schumacher came back when he was 40, so you can't actually. I don't think you can compare the two. But the main problem I think is his attitude.
Yeah,
I know that Mike from the F1 Fanatics channel. He is a massive Fernando Alonso fan,
yeah,
and we sort of like we're not arguing about it, but sort of uh, have a friendly sort of debate about it.
uh-huh.
But what is your point? Like, what is your view on that?
Look, I can appreciate what Fernando Alonso accomplished in the sport, and one thing that I love about Fernando Alonso is that everything he sits in, he really gives, pushes pedal to the metal, and I admire that about Alonso. He's a true winner. But if we look at his time at Renault when he was winning, so he won two titles. He had, like you say, he had two stints at Renault, 6 seasons in total in a Renault car. But if I think when we think about the prospects of Renault, we need to think about more his time at McLaren most recently, just before he retired. The McLaren wasn't a race-winning car by any means. There were a lot of problems with it. There was a lot of design flaws with it, and there were a lot of reasons why it wasn't at the top of the grid. And that's sort of similar to the situation that Renault are in at the moment. And I just feel like putting Alonso back into that position again, I think you're just going to get the same results.
Yeah, and I think, do you agree with him being toxic for Elite Formula One team, or?
Well, yeah, yes and no, because we all know that the Formula One media like to blow things up, and sometimes things get out of proportion. But there are a lot of people within the paddock that have got respect for Fernando Alonso, and there are a lot of people that haven't. But I think people said the same things about Michael Schumacher. People said the same things about Lewis Hamilton, that they're arrogant, this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, they're race-winning drivers. So race-winning drivers tend to be demanding drivers, and if the team that they're at aren't delivering to the level they expect, then they tend to, crack the whip and threaten to move on, and that's when the bridges get burnt. So I think a lot of Fernando's toxic behaviour has been more around the fact that the car's not been performing to where he feels his ability was in the first place.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that condemns any kind of behaviour that was toxic within a team. I'm just saying that I think sometimes the media read into things in certain ways, but as a fan of Formula One, I'd personally like to see Fernando Alonso just stay where he is, stay retired, and leave his legacy, alone, really.
So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, we've talked about Fernando Alonso at length now. We've talked about Bottas. By coming back to Bottas once again, do you think he is ready to move on?
I think it all depends, doesn't it? Because everything I'm hearing at the moment is suggesting that Valtteri is the best he's ever been. And, I really think that Valtteri's been unlucky in a way because although he's in a very good car, some would say the best car on the grid is pretty unarguable at the moment that it is the best car on the grid. But because he lives in Lewis Hamilton's shadow, or he races in Lewis Hamilton's shadow, I think he's very underestimated as a driver. He's actually, for me, he's a bit too good to be in a Renault at the moment. The way Renault are at the moment, Bottas is just too good to be. And fans have their opinions on Bottas, and I know a lot of people do say that Bottas isn't good enough to be in the Mercedes and this, that, and the other. But he's a proven race winner. He's proven that he's fast with pole positions after pole positions, and he's beaten Lewis on a couple of occasions dominantly as well. I just feel that Renault would not be attractive to him. A little bit like how Renault wouldn't really be attractive to Sebastian Vettel. And the other thing is you've got to consider with Bottas is he's had some issues with his marriage and some other things away from the sport, and they're not really to be discussed by us. But all I would say is that maybe that would be on his mind when it comes to negotiating with a new team, whether or not he wants to do that. He might move to something that's a little bit more friendly for his personal life. Like I know he likes to dither a bit in rally. Maybe he'd do a bit of Formula E. I don't know, but I think after Mercedes, I'm not sure, where he'd stand.
Well, maybe he can even retire.
Well, there is that as well, but I just think the Bottas thing is just too tough to call. And until we know what's happening at Mercedes, I just think, I think we need to see some racing this year before we call that one. I think, and see how fast Bottas is this year in comparison to Hamilton, and see what sort of resource Mercedes are putting behind Bottas to mount a challenge against Hamilton as well.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think, I think Bottas is. Do you think Bottas it would be good enough to be world champion?
I mean, if it's ever going to happen, it's got to be this season, hasn't it? I mean, if he's ever going to be a world champion, he needs to do it this year, because Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, George Russell, Lando Norris. When you look at the list of young drivers that are coming through and making an impact, it's only going to be a matter of time before one of those guys is mounting. And even Carlos Sainz, I mean, I'm not saying Carlos Sainz is going to win a title in his first year at Ferrari, but Carlos Sainz is a dangerous driver, and the front of that grid is getting more and more competitive as these young drivers come through. So I think that Bottas, if he's going to beat Lewis, it's got to be this year. And if he's going to win a title, it's got to be this year. So I really do think that 2020 is make or break for Valtteri.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's very unlikely for him to win the championship. I mean, that's not because I've got nothing against Valtteri Bottas, so I don't want any hate from any Valtteri Bottas fans. But when you think about the like what Lewis Hamilton said, he was planning to have a sabbatical, but because of the current situation, that sort of got out of his mind now, because we currently have a sabbatical. So I can only think that Lewis Hamilton is only gonna come out all guns blazing.
At this point, I think that Hamilton's on for 8 world titles at this point, and I think a lot on my channel I talk about Lewis, and I hold Lewis in a high regard. I'm not a Lewis Hamilton fan or a Mercedes fan, but I'm a fan of all British drivers, and I think that you have to respect what he's achieved in the sport, and I still think he's hungry for so much more, and it really wouldn't surprise me if he won 8. I wouldn't stretch as far as 9, but I'd say 8 world titles is within his grasp because, like you say, this year I can really see him coming out all guns blazing because he's had a little bit of a mental break from Formula One, and he's going to be more sort of prepared for a season, and then with the new regulations being held back another year, I just feel like that gives another year for Mercedes to be dominant. So I really could see 8 championships for Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas seeing the back door at the end of this season. But who knows if he'll go to Renault? If I was going to put my money on somebody going to Renault, it wouldn't be Bottas.
Yeah, no disrespect to Renault. Yeah, I think any Formula One team in the current situation, especially, don't get me wrong, but I was shocked when I heard the Williams news.
Yeah.
But I was also equally shocked that Renault have said they're going to stay, because I was convinced that Renault was going to pull the plug.
Yeah, obviously Renault are a road car maker, and all of their finance, apart from sponsorships on the Formula One car, come from car sales. So, these times are tough, and who knows? We're still not out of the water with this sort of thing. So, that Renault are committing to Formula One now, but who knows? What happens next? It all depends on everything, really. Everything's so up in the air at the moment. There is still time for teams to struggle, and because going back to teams pulling the plug, I was convinced that Haas might pull the plug early because they didn't get very good results last season, and it's just a cost that Gene Haas doesn't need. So I don't know, but I hope that Renault do stay because they've got a rich history in the sport, really. When you look back to Alonso's heydays, and they've had, not just Alonso, they've had a lot of great drivers pass through their ranks. But one option I could see potentially is Nico Hulkenberg coming back.
Oh yes.
I don't know I don't know how bitter that relationship was at the end. It's not very well documented. Hulkenberg said that he felt like he was just sort of given the boot, but do you think he'd come back to Renault? What do you think?
It's a difficult one, right? And again, a lot of my subscribers and a lot of my viewers said, because I said, no way.
Yeah.
I literally said, there's no way that Nico Hulkenberg would come back to Renault, because I think it would just be Daniel Kvyat, Toro Rosso, reloaded.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is, if he comes back, does Renault really want him, or do they just use him because they're
That is the worry, isn't it? Renault would never be looking for another driver if Ricciardo had never made that move to McLaren. But if we look at what happened there, realistically, Ricciardo was never going to stay. Renault promised Ricciardo a car that could compete, and they haven't delivered it. And Ricciardo is running out of years, and he's a real competitor. He's a very fierce competitor. He's a jokey guy on the outside, but he's always going to want to be in a car that can compete. So I think that Renault should have really expected Ricciardo's departure, but like you say, now they're in a position where it's almost like any driver with some kind of caliber will do. I don't think one driver that I think would be good for Renault is if they could somehow poach Kevin Magnussen away from Haas. But then again, Nico Hülkenberg could replace Romain Grosjean at Haas just as easily, and we could see that. You know, we saw a glimpse of that rivalry between K-Mag and Magnussen and Hülkenberg a little while ago. So, you know, maybe that's something as well. But it's just so tough to call who's going to sit in that Renault seat.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see Magnussen going back to Renault. I really can't see it because there was bad blood. You know what I mean? There was bad blood back then. I don't think Haas is gonna approach Nico Hülkenberg unless Nico Hülkenberg takes a dramatic, and I'm talking a dramatic pay cut.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, go on.
Because, like, I'm thinking, and this is what well, your opinion as well, because Nico Hülkenberg's supposed sort of yearly salary was something in the range of 4 to 5 million a year. Like, now, what justifies that?
Yeah, I mean, he's never had a podium, so I don't know how he's worth that kind of money. I mean, look, once upon a time, Hülkenberg was the next big thing. Once upon a time, he was. Obviously, you know, he's been a very unlucky driver in his career, and it hasn't come to fruition. And you know, it's been a difficult time for Nico at times. And you know what? It was almost the cherry on the cake last year in Germany when he was, you know, sat in a prime position to get on the podium during the race with all the chaos breaking loose around him, and then at that last minute he let it slip from his fingers and ended up in the barrier. You know, that was almost just like a glimpse into how his whole career's been. But I was gutted to see him leave Renault, especially for Ocon. Now, there's no disrespect to Ocon. He's a really good driver, but I do feel that Hülkenberg deserves a seat on the grid somewhere. You know, or he did, at least for 2020. Now, obviously, we've got a whole new landscape now looking forward, but like you say, he's not worth that kind of money. You know, these 5-6 million figures, that's a lot of money for any driver. And if you look at Lando Norris and those guys, they're not earning anywhere near that. So, you know, like you say, what justifies that kind of money? Nothing. But that being said, he's earning nothing at the minute, really. So would he jump back in the seat for half the price? I don't know.
The thing is also, I've got a question for you, okay. And I've done a video about this one. What would you say if I say Valtteri was to Renault and Hülkenberg to Mercedes?
As a main driver or as a test driver?
As a main driver.
I can't see it. I can't. Look, Hülkenberg is a good driver, and in a good car, he would. I've got no doubt he'd finally get that podium under his belt. But with George Russell waiting in the wings, the first thing to point out is that George Russell is probably the future of Mercedes if Mercedes are going to stay in the sport. You know, he is probably their next Lewis Hamilton. And, you know, I know some people are like, oh, why is George Russell overrated? And like you say, I've done a video on George Russell and why he's, you know, so highly regarded. And there's no doubt that he's got a world championship in him if he's in the right car. Yeah. So I don't understand why Mercedes would back a driver like Nico Hülkenberg over George Russell, especially with everything going on at Williams at the moment. I sort of feel like Mercedes are going to want George Russell in that seat because the uncertainty of what's happening at Williams, you know, could affect things for George, and they probably want to sort of protect their future golden boy. And you know, that's obviously an assumption that I'm making, but I just can't see how Hulkenberg would jump the gun over George Russell. Just because George Russell's got youth on his side, and you know, a lot of pundits and fans do tip him to take that seat after Bottas is gone.
The reason why I thought it might be Nico Hulkenberg for one season is because I'm not convinced that Bottas will stay, especially because there's even rumors about him talking to Red Bull.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So I sort of thought, you know, well, I'm just being hypothetical.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like you said earlier, stranger things have happened, haven't they, in Formula One, and stranger driver moves have happened than that. But I mean, like you say, it does make sense because Nico could go there for a year, just fill the seat, and then when George Russell's ready, pop him in. But that being said, Vettel could do the same job, but it's just going to cost more money. But Mercedes, you know, they don't have money troubles. So I think if they're going to put someone in the seat on a one-season basis, it's going to be Vettel, to be honest. And like you said earlier about the interest that Toto's showing, I do think something's going on there. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Seb make that move.
But question for you: What would happen if? Because I can see Lewis Hamilton, like I could even see Lewis Hamilton moving to Aston Martin.
Yeah.
And because I think, yes, he's 35 now. Yeah, you know, he's 35, so he's not.
Yeah, he's the second oldest on the grid, isn't he? After Kimi Räikkönen. So
yeah. So one has to consider that he might want to retire, so to speak, right? Do I see him going? Do I see him wanting to have the 8 titles? You know, because he's got other commitments and he's got other commitments. I'm definitely convinced that despite what Total was saying, I think Vettel I think he's going to hang up the helmet because I think he's fallen out of love with Formula One. And I can kind of see Lewis Hamilton going the same way because he's got other interests as well. So, if that happens? Who would you put in if both of them retire?
I mean, it's a good question, to be honest. I think the possibility of Hamilton moving to Aston Martin it's not unheard of. It's something that could happen, especially with Toto making a financial commitment to Aston Martin, and there's rumours of him leaving Mercedes as well. And if he was to move to Aston Martin, he's got the pulling power to take Lewis with him. If Lewis leaves Mercedes either for retirement or for Aston Martin, and Seb decides to hang it up, and that leaves seats at Mercedes, then to be most realistic option, I think, for next year is that if Vettel says, look, I'm out of the game, I don't really want to race no more, I'm happy retiring and spending time with my family, I can see them extending Bottas for another year while they wait for George Russell to be ready, and then moving somebody else into that other seat. Who? Maybe Nico Hulkenberg. But then again, Lance Stroll might be a good option. He's depending on what happens with Toto Wolff, of course, but Toto and Stroll's dad have got a good relationship. So, and a lot of people do say that Lance Stroll would be, very fast in a Mercedes. So, maybe he's an option. There's a couple of interesting options there. But I can see Lewis staying with Mercedes at least until the new regulations come into play. I think even if he was to move to Aston Martin, he would wait maybe a year to see what Aston Martin have produced with their money and their resources, and see what they look like. Next year we're going to have our first glimpse of Aston Martin. Maybe Lewis will stay where he is, race this year with Mercedes, race next year with Mercedes, use other teams as a bargaining tool to make more money out of Mercedes. And then if Aston Martin look interesting in 22, then he'll go. If they don't, maybe he'll hang it up.
Yeah, I mean, the most likely for Renault, I think, coming back to Renault, I think the most likely is Ocon next to Hülkenberg. If you put everything into, if you put the thing down, because the reason why I finally say that, it's because don't forget, Kimi Räikkönen got kicked out of Ferrari at, was it
17, wasn't it? 18.
No, before that, because he made room earlier for Alonso, so he got
sure.
He got kicked out for Alonso, and then he still come back. So and I think if the money is right, I think any driver would forget that there might have been some bad blood or something.
Yeah, it's not a bad point, to be honest. And like you say, drivers, they want to drive. And if they've only got one racing option and they're willing to pay them to get in the car, I'm sure Nico's not going to hold any grudges. So Nico is probably the most likely option. For me, I think we're looking at a rookie driver, so either Guan Yu Zhu or Christian Lundgaard coming up from the academy. I don't think Zhu's got the super license points yet, but I think Lundgaard has. So it all depends on how the Formula 2 and Formula 3 seasons pan out. But the only reason I say that is because after all of this, financial trouble due to the pandemic, that would be a very cheap option for Renault. And either one of those guys would make a quite strong support driver for Ocon. And it would give Renault a couple of years to sort of recuperate any losses and then maybe mount a challenge with the new regulations. So for me, I think maybe one of the younger lads. If I was Renault, that's what I'd be doing. But Hülkenberg, again, would be a great option. But like you say, it's just about how much Hülkenberg's going to cost Renault to put in the seat.
Yeah, but then, I mean, because I think everybody, right, has to face reality, and especially in this current situation, right, we have to get the economy going again, and we have to rescue sort of the globe, if that makes sense. I mean,
sure.
I was really shocked when Williams was put up for sale, and I still hope that is a part sale and not a full sale.
Yeah, I think all fans must be with that cause, because to lose the Williams name for Formula One, regardless of how they've done in the last few years, and their ups and downs, the Williams name's a historical one, and I think all F1 fans want to see it remain.
Because I tell you something, yeah. I mean, I do translating as well, German English translating, because I'm from Germany originally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote to every single Formula One team, every single one of them, how I can combine my love for Formula One and the translation, and Claire Williams was the only one that bothered to respond, right? She was, not only did she respond, she actually organized me a tour of the team, like factory,
Right.
and giving me a nice letter and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
So I really don't want, you know, I can understand they need investments, but
Yeah.
I really don't want them to give 100% of the company
No,
away,
I agree. Yeah,
away,
I'm
away.
definitely with you on that. Yeah.
Some Dick and Harry, like Latifi, or because I I don't think anyone understands how much the Williams team helps Frank as well. Because
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I think if Frank Williams didn't have his Formula One team, I think he would have he would have died a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely poured his life into that Formula One team. And if I'm assuming you will have seen the Frank Williams documentary,
Yeah,
and that just really shows how much of his life he's put into motorsport and the Williams F1 team. And just that alone is enough to want that. The name Williams deserves to survive in Formula One for a lot of reasons, and it'd be a huge shame to lose it to a consortium of investors that don't really give a rat's ass about Formula One and are
yeah.
more in it for the financial gain that they could potentially get out of it. So for me, I'd really like to see a large investment and then rename the team, Williams, then something else. Just it's not going to happen. But let's just say Audi wanted to buy some of the team, Williams, Audi. Obviously they had a failed relationship with a couple of providers before, but Williams, BMW, something like that. I don't know. As long as the Williams name stays, I'd be okay with that, and I'm sure you guys as Williams fans would be too.
I mean, I just want Williams, the Williams family, to stay in it in some kind of capacity. Because
Yeah.
to be honest with you, I don't know what your job is, but I was talking to a couple of my subscribers, and they say half the value of that team is the backstory, yeah, and the name. We mustn't forget that Williams was or is the third most successful team of all times.
Yeah. And they've had some absolutely legendary drivers pass through their ranks as well. Some of the best drivers of all time have driven in a Williams. So, there's rich history there. But talking about Williams, as we're on the Renault subject, what is the potential of someone like George Russell driving for Renault? Because I'm not saying next year, but let's say Mercedes don't commit their future to Formula One. Does Russell potentially move to a midfield team?
Could be.
I mean, it's something no one's really talking about, and for good reason, because Mercedes are in the game at the moment, and that looks like a clear path. But there is a chance that Mercedes won't commit their future, and then we're back onto the Renault situation where, who knows? I mean, don't get me wrong. I think everything will be honky dory, but there's always a chance. Or Latifi could be really impressive, and he could move to Renault. Latifi's a good driver. Obviously, he's paid for his drive at Williams, which is much needed cash injection for Williams. But if he proves himself, maybe he'd be a good option for Renault.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a question for you. What do you think about this, right? Because do you think Lance Stroll would ever leave his dad's team if somebody like Ferrari or Mercedes comes knocking?
Yeah, cool. I mean, look, Lance is a racer at the end of the day, and his dad's only paid him into the sport so his son can do well. I mean, don't get me wrong. they are businessmen. His dad is definitely a businessman, and he's pulled together a consortium of investors to do what he's doing over at Aston Martin. And he invested a large amount into Williams when Lance was there. But if Lance earns a drive somewhere at a top side on merit, I can't see why they'd want to turn him away. I can't see why he turned down the opportunity just to stay with his dad's team. I really think that. I'd like to see Lance in a faster car, to be honest, because he's a good driver, and I think he's underrated, to be honest. Because he's not very liked because of his attitude in the media, I think, more than anything. But I could see him going to a Mercedes or a Ferrari, not a Red Bull, but maybe. I think Mercedes is probably his most likely option out of the top three. But I can't see him turning down the opportunity just because his dad has paid him in.
But do you think his dad will pull out of Formula One if he goes?
Who knows? I think it depends on how Aston Martin is. If Aston Martin's competing from the very beginning, from next year when they take the Aston Martin name and they redesign the team and they get some really top heads in to look at the design side of things. If they come in and they're dominant, he might say, I'll have a piece of this because it's going to be a brand. It's a brand thing, isn't it? And it's going to make him money. Formula One teams, some of them do make money. A lot of them run. The Williams have just posted a loss of, was it 16 million last year, something like that. But
it's 13 million. I think.
So 30 million roughly. That's a big loss, but some teams are making a lot of money. And when it comes to Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton's a brand. He's making money for Tommy Hilfiger. He's making money for Puma. He's making money for Mercedes. And if Stroll can turn that Aston Martin team into a brand and make it sellable and develop a decent fan base, then I don't see why he'd walk away from it as long as it's making him money. He's a businessman at the end of the day. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Because there's also Lance was saying last year that he was getting a bit bored of racing in the midfield and that he might step away completely. And then it's a question of does he keep his stake in that team when his son's not even racing anymore? I don't know, but it's all something we'll have to see unfold.
I think we need the teams, right? Because I think 14 grid, with 7 teams, ultimately, that's not Formula One anymore.
No, I agree.
I think that's not Formula One anymore. But the thing is, if you think about it, Williams have always said, and this is what shocked me about Williams, they've always categorically said, we're not going to sell the team. Yeah, we're not going to sell the team. Come what may. And the thing is, Rocket have not paid. Rocket have not been able to pay their sponsorship.
Yeah.
Now, my argument, I did a podcast. I did an episode with Will from the F1 podcast, Formula One. You know what I mean? And I actually forgot to mention in that, if a sponsor doesn't pay you the money, why, and you've got a contract, why does Williams not consider suing them?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's ultimately that money could be the reason why they're in that situation at the minute.
Yeah, I think it's a bit like the situation with Haas, isn't it? That happened with Rich Energy.
Yeah.
But the problem is, a lot of these things we don't see the contracts that are written up, so we don't know what the terms between Rocket and Williams were, just like we don't really know what the terms between Rich Energy and Haas were. What we do know about the Haas relationship is that the payments were performance based. So if at any point Rich Energy felt like Haas weren't performing at the level that they wanted to for their name, for their brand, they could pull the plug. And that's essentially what happened. Now, I don't know if maybe Rocket had a similar deal where it was based around performance and their improvement, and they had certain improvement markers that they needed to hit. But all coming into this season, all was well, because, you know, Williams released this really nice new livery, which was, you know, title sponsor Rocket livery. And it's a beautiful livery, and now they're going to have to change it. So something's changed within the last, 6 to 8 weeks. Maybe it's the financial circumstances of Rocket as well, with the pandemic, and maybe there's something in the contract that says about, if we're in financial trouble, we can pull out of this contract or whatever, and they've ended it on mutual terms. I think it's difficult because, like I say, we don't know what's in the contract. But I think if Williams had any grounds to chase and take legal action, I think they would, because they're in desperate need of the money. So if they were owed it, they'd probably chase it.
But the thing is, I know this is one thing that I don't want to happen, and I don't know whether you've seen on Twitter. I think you know what I'm on about. Have you seen the Williams the Rich Energy logo?
Yeah. I mean, the reason that photo is circulating is because the original livery, the livery Williams were using last year, Rich Energy made a bid to be the title sponsor on that car, and they ended up with Haas rather than Williams. So there was a concept livery that was designed for Rich Energy, and that's the photo that's now circulating. Rich Energy have tarnished their name in the sport because of how they treated Haas and how Haas treated them, and the whole situation. I mean, I can't see them taking the title. I personally think the title sponsor for Williams will be Lavazza, Latifi's coffee brand. They're the most likely to probably take that, in my opinion. And I think that Williams will probably return to a blue and white livery, but we'll see.
Quick, final question for you. Like, if you was cerebral, and you had to make the decision, who would you take and why?
For Renault?
Yes.
Or for Williams?
First for Renault.
Okay, so for Renault, if I had to make the decision to go alongside Ocon, I'd probably take Hülkenberg. I think it's going to be Zhou or Lundgaard, but I would take Hülkenberg.
You would take Hülkenberg. And the next question is, if you was Claire Williams or Frank Williams,
mm-hmm.
and you had to make a deal with saving the team, what would it be and why?
So the deal I'd look to make is probably some sort of deal where Latifi invests more money into the team in return for the title sponsor of Lavazza, because that way Williams can keep their name and they can get a fairly heavy cash injection, and maybe in return that they will solidify Latifi's future at Williams and they'll give him a longer contract or something along those lines. I think that's the deal that Williams need to be looking for. If they can't secure that, they're going to have to look at a sale. When it comes to a sale, I think, it's a very open book, and we don't know who might look at, buying Williams, because Williams are in a position where you could probably just create your own F1 team and develop a car and be about where Williams are. So the sale, the attractiveness of the sale really comes with the name Williams. So I can see whoever buying it just wanting to keep the name and the legacy, because that's the most attractive thing about Williams at the moment.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
So And the thing is, on the Williams thing, I'm confused because when I first heard the news, it was like Williams are up for sale. But then, like when I looked into it more deeply, they haven't actually said that it's going to be an out and outright sale, right? Like they
Yeah,
said,
yeah. I think what they're doing is they are, because like you said, they've been so persistent in the past about we're Williams, we're going to stay Williams, we're going to develop everything in house, we aren't going to sell, we'll go down with the ship if necessary. And I think they've been so committed to that, they've got no idea what their value is. So I think it's more an exercise of working out if there's any interest from investors that want to make more than just a sponsorship on the car or more than just put in a pay driver, but want to own a stake in the team because they've never explored that. So I think that when Claire Williams has come out and said that, I think it's strategic, and I think she's just looking to see if there's any sort of, it's a bit of bait really in the water, and they're just coming to see if any fish bite, and if they do, what sort of money would they be bringing to the table? And I think that's what it's more about.
so you don't think it's actually a full? You don't think it's actually a full, necessarily a full 100% sale?
Not yet. I can't see it at this point. I think that Claire is very, very persistent that she wants to keep Williams with Williams. Frank is probably feeling the same way. And if they are backed into a corner and they have to sell, then maybe they will, and maybe we will see a new team. But I think that their ideal scenario is to find an investor and sell a proportion of the team, and still keep a level of control.
Well, I would say 70-30.
Yeah, something like that.
Because, as I said, Williams is the only privateer team on the grid.
I know, yeah, and there's a reason for that, and the reason for that is that, if you look at the way Williams are developing, they're just not developing at the same speed as other teams. And if you look at Haas came into the sport, basically bought a load of parts from a load of other teams and created a competitive car straight away. And last season was their first difficult. Well, they've had difficulties, but last season was their most difficult season out of all of them they've had so far. And that was because they're starting to try and develop things in-house. So I think Williams need to find that fine line between developing things in-house and outsourcing, and finding ways to save time, resources, and money by bringing in parts from elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think they need to get a bit of credibility back for themselves.
Yeah, definitely. They don't want to be that backmarker team forever, and the Williams name deserves to be, at least, look at McLaren. To be honest, it wasn't that long ago that McLaren were the joke of the sport, and they'd had a mighty downfall, and now they're on their way to being back towards the top of the grid. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to make it this year or next year, but they are moving in the right direction, and there's no reason why Williams can't do the same thing if they put together a very good plan, they bring in the right personnel, and they spend their money in the right way.
Yeah, and the final question really is do you think Renault do you think they have the commitment to stay in Formula One for the long term?
I think at the moment, I can't see them going anywhere at the minute. However, when these new regulations come in, I feel like if they don't hit the ground running with that, then they might consider pulling the plug. They are currently one of the teams operating over the cap that's coming in. So the new 175 million budget cap that's coming in, only 4 teams currently operate under that. And Renault aren't one of them. So first of all, we've got to ask ourselves, how are Renault going to handle, having to cut costs and that sort of thing. And then we've got to ask ourselves, how are they going to handle the new regulations going into 2022? And I think that'll be the breaking point for me about whether Renault stay in the sport or not. If they can hit the ground running with the new regulations, they produce a good car and they're competitive straight away, and they recover well from the pandemic financially, I think there's no reason why they don't stay in the sport. But if they don't develop a good car under the new regulations and they struggle to, regain finance after everything that's going on at the moment, I think they may cut the tyres.
Do you think Daniel Ricciardo regretted the move as soon as he signed the papers?
I think that the Ricciardo move was tactical. I think that he didn't want to be at Red Bull. It was causing him too much stress. He didn't like the situation with Max, and he didn't like being a second driver, and he thought he was going to get a seat at Ferrari. I think he signed that Renault contract because he thought that I'll go to Renault and then I'll move to Ferrari, and it hasn't panned out that way. And as a McLaren fan, I'm more than happy to have him at McLaren. Ricciardo's a great driver, and I look forward to seeing him in the orange and blue. But with that being said, I think he, for a moment, believed in the mission, because at the time Red Bull were facing uncertainty with a new engine provider that Ricciardo didn't really back. So he pulled the plug on Red Bull, said, I'll leave you and Verstappen to it and I'm going to go elsewhere. And then I think, last season, he just didn't get what he was hoping to get out of Renault. And I think it was only, halfway into the season, he was probably starting to think about what his future looked like. And he's been pipped to the post for the Ferrari seat by Carlos, but there's no reason why he can't make a very good situation out of being at McLaren if McLaren can produce the car.
Yeah, I mean, McLaren wanted him before the Renault move, didn't they?
Yeah. McLaren and Renault were the options, but at the time, McLaren weren't as strong as they are now. So McLaren have made a lot of progress. Last season, especially, the MCL 34 made a lot of progress. Now we're looking at the MCL 35 and we're saying, okay, what's this going to be able to produce on track? And if they make another step forward this year, then there's no reason why 2 seasons from now they can be up there again with the big boys. I really do believe that with McLaren. And if Ricciardo's at the helm and Lando's, matured as a driver, that's a great driver pairing, both for marketing reasons and for, points winning reasons.
So, final questions, because I think you are a McLaren fan, right?
Yeah.
What was the first race, if any, that you've been to?
So my first race was Silverstone in 2007. That's my only race as well. So interesting, I know, as such a big Formula One fan, but I just haven't had the means to get to other races, whether it be for financial reasons in the past or whether it be to other commitments like jobs and that sort of thing. So yeah, Silverstone 2007 was my first and only. But I was supposed to be going this year. I was supposed to be doing 3 races this year. But obviously that's not on the cards now. So it looks like I'm going to be doing Monza, Spa and Silverstone next year, hopefully.
Okay, so what was the first Formula One race that you ever saw?
It was that race in 2007. Yeah, that was the first one. My old man took me to that. So yeah, what's that now? 13 years ago, something like that. I did vaguely watch it when I was a little bit younger, but I couldn't pinpoint what races were what. My mum was a huge Damon Hill fan. I think she fancied him a little bit. So obviously Michael Schumacher was, every boy's hero. Yeah. I used to make wine box hats and draw his helmet and name, and then I'd sit in a washing basket and pretend I was in a Formula One car. So, but the earliest race I remember in terms of detail and going to it was Silverstone in 2007.
So and what do you want to? Where do you see your YouTube channel about 5 years from now?
Who knows, to be honest. At the minute I'm doing it because not a lot of my friends Formula One fans, and I wanted to meet other Formula One fans so I could have conversations like this one that we're having now. And talk about Formula One and have a genuine conversation with somebody else that has a real opinion about Formula One that isn't just their cars that go fast. So that was my motivation for starting the channel. A little bit like yours, really. It was just motivation, so you could talk to people about Formula One.
Yeah.
So as long as I'm still doing that's all I care about. I mean, I'd love to hit a reasonable amount of subscribers, so my videos are seen by more people. But at the moment, I'm appreciative of the audience that I have, and I'm appreciative of the Formula One YouTube community that I'm in. So I'm happy where I am, but we'll see what happens in 5 years' time. Who knows? YouTube might even have disappeared in 5 years.
No, it's not gonna happen. But because funny story. Why I started was because I've got cerebral palsy.
Yeah, sure.
In a wheelchair, and I got a bit of anxiety as well. When I was down in Essex about 5 years ago, I had a bout of anxiety, and so I was ordering a taxi on the phone, and they said, we can't send you because you're drunk, right? That's what they said. And I wasn't drunk. I just had a bit of stuttering and I was a bit anxious.
Yeah, sure.
That's why I stopped. And because of what they said, I then stopped speaking for three weeks. Right? Literally, I stopped speaking for 3 weeks. And the doctor said to me, when I came back to Stafford, the doctor said to me, bear in mind, I didn't even speak to my doctor, who I've known for 15 years, because I thought nothing what I was saying made sense, right? So I didn't speak to my doctor, but the doctor said to me, Raz, we've got to get you talking again. So get yourself a camera and talk about Formula One. So I thought to myself, well, if I get myself a camera, I might as well put it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Right? And that's sort of how I started being confident in speaking again. So that's how my sort of YouTube journey started. And now every time I get a bit anxious, or even I do a video every day nearly, and meeting new people, doing interactions with you and with Will from and with the F1 debate show, and with Josh Ravel and Tomo and Mike from the F1 Fanatics channel. Yeah, we are all good friends, aren't we? Sort of.
Yeah, and you know what? It's a nice story because it doesn't have to always be about getting massive on YouTube and this, that, and the other. It's awesome that both of us found an output in something like this. So Formula One is something we all have in common, and I enjoy your videos. I like your content, and so do your 500 plus subscribers and all the ones that are to come in the future. So keep working on your channel, as I will, and hopefully we'll continue to have chats like this one.
Any more advice what you can give me sort of on me thumbnails? Because I've only just sort of started using Photoshop.
Yeah, I mean, my thumbnails are normally just rushed, just because I use Photoshop quite a lot for work and stuff, but
what do you do?
I just sort of whack them. I work in IT and design and that sort of stuff, so I do a little bit of that. But I mean, in terms of thumbnails, I just try and make them bright, make them stand out, big bold letters. That normally works for me. So, but there's nothing wrong with the way you're doing yours now, and you've got to 500 subscribers as you are. So continue as you're going.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever want me on your channel,
Yeah, 100%. Let's do it.
Drop me a line, and then I've got you on Skype now anyway. So no doubt that we're gonna continue supporting each other's channel. And one other thing, how the hell did you manage to put yourself, your little picture where you put yourself into Lewis Hamilton's
Yeah, Valtteri. It's Valtteri Bottas, but yeah, I did that on Photoshop. I'll get one done for you as a little present for having me on your channel. I'll get one done for you and I'll send it over to you.
Thank you, mate. Really
That's
appreciate
all right.
it. And if you can send me over your pictures for the thumbnail, and then I'll get it sorted today, hopefully, and then you can put the link on your channel and then market it wherever you want to do it, and then let's maybe I can get some of my subscribers jumping over to yours and vice versa, sort of thing, right?
Yeah, mate, definitely, and I look forward to collaborating with you again soon, mate.
How did you find me anyway? How did you find me?
Yeah, mate, good quality. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I found you on obviously YouTube when I was looking around the like the Twitter community and all of that sort of thing. So I think the Twitter community, the F1 Twitter community, is pretty strong, and there's a lot of positive things going on over there, and there's a lot of good YouTube stuff going on as well. So I'm just trying to be honest, make sure that I know about anybody else that's producing content. So one, I'm not copying anybody, and two, I can work with them a bit like this.
Yeah. Am I your first collaboration then, or have you done one before?
Yeah. Well, no, I haven't. The only collaboration I've done, which wasn't really a collaboration, was I did an interview with Louis Delatraz for Formula.
How the hell did you get him?
Well, I just I dropped him a little message. I said, Louis, I'm quite a big fan of Louis Delatraz. I've been following him a little while. I noticed that he liked something on my Twitter. He retweeted something or something. So I just dropped him a message and said, how you doing, Louis? I'd love to, get you on my channel and talk about what you're doing at Haas and talk about, the sort of things that you've been doing within Charouz racing and Formula 2. And the other thing is they're moving to the new 18-inch tyres in Formula 2 this year. So I wanted to talk to him a little bit about that. So I told him about what I wanted to ask him about, and he was very interested. So he come back to me. We sorted out a little meeting, a little bit like this one, and we just had a chat. And he was a really nice guy. And I'm hoping to get a couple more drivers on my channel within the next few months. But we'll see what happens.
Mate, do me a favour.
Yeah.
Because, obviously I want to get my channel combined with, I'm concentrating on my channel more than I do the translation at the minute. And my dream is to get a Formula 1 journalist on.
Right, yeah.
To do what you did with Louis. So, any advice that you can give me?
I'd just say, just keep knocking on doors. I mean, Louis was the first driver that I had respond to me, and I have messaged others since and had no response. People are busy, but just keep asking the question, keep sending the emails, keep being positive, keep putting out good content, like you are. And the rest will come, and eventually you'll get to the point where you'll have who you want on your channel, and that'll be good. And I look forward to seeing it.
I mean, look, I might even manage to get Claire Williams on for a bit of a.
Hey, who knows? If you do that, we'll all be jealous.
Yeah, but I'll let you know, mate. Cheers for doing that with me, and I hope.
No worries, mate.
I hope your family and everybody is safe from the coronavirus.
Thank you, mate.
How are you keeping with it, or is it driving you nuts? Or?
I think it's driving everybody nuts, isn't it? It's driving everybody crazy, but we've all got to put up with it. It's here to stay for a little bit. So all we could do is stay safe, and see where we come out on the other end.
Thank you, mate, and I'll let you know when I've edited this video, and I'll speak to you soon, mate.
Yeah, all right, mate. Take care. Thank you for having me. I'll see you soon.
No worries, mate. Bye.
Bye.